I remember the day Clara walked into our lives like it was yesterday. Dad had been all work and no play since Mom passed away in that accident. I was too young to really remember her, but the pictures around the house and the way Dad talked about her made me miss her like crazy. Anyway, it was a cold Tuesday evening when Dad said we needed to talk. I figured it might be about another move, or maybe he was finally going to get me that puppy I kept asking for. Boy, was I off the mark. Chloe, Dad started, his voice serious, which was my cue to really pay attention. I've met someone. My heart sank. Not because I didn't want him to be happy, but because the thought of someone trying to replace Mom felt like a betrayal. But I was just a kid, what did I know about adult stuff like loneliness and moving on? She's beautiful, kind, and I really think you'll like her, he continued, trying to sound upbeat. The doorbell rang, cutting our conversation short. Dad went to answer it, and in came Clara. Even to my young eyes, she was stunning, like those ladies in the fashion magazines my nanny sometimes flipped through. But it was her smile that caught me off guard, it didn't quite reach her eyes. Chloe, this is Clara, Dad introduced us, his voice full of hope. Hi, I muttered, unsure of what else to say. Hello, Chloe. You're just as adorable as your father described, Clara said, her voice sweet but somehow distant. Dinner that night was an awkward affair. Dad was trying too hard, Clara was politely distant, and I just wanted to disappear. The conversation was mostly between Dad and Clara, with me throwing in a yeah or no when absolutely necessary. So, Chloe, Clara eventually turned her attention to me, her tone a bit too sugary. Your dad tells me you love animals. Yeah, I guess, I replied, not really in the mood to chat. We'll have to see about getting you involved in some animal charity work. It's good for young girls to learn responsibility, she said, the suggestion sounding more like a decree. Dad seemed pleased with the idea, but I wasn't fooled. I could tell when adults were just saying things to make conversation. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and too many please and thank yous. After Clara left, Dad was eager to know what I thought about her. Well, she's nice, I said, which was kid code for I haven't decided if I like her yet, but I don't want to upset you. Dad laughed, a sound I hadn't heard much of since Mom died. Give her a chance, Chloe. Clara's been through a lot too. She understands loss like we do. In the days that followed, Clara's presence became more pronounced. Her things started appearing around the house, and her visits became more frequent. Each time, she tried to engage with me, offering to do my hair or take me shopping, but it all felt too structured, too calculated. There was no warmth, no genuine connection. It was as if she was playing a role rather than genuinely trying to be a part of our family. Dad, why does she always look at me like that? I finally asked one evening, after Clara had left from one of her increasingly regular visits. Like what, Chloe? Dad looked puzzled, his forehead creasing. Like she's studying me, figuring out her next move, I said, struggling to put my feelings into words. Dad sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Clara's just trying to find her way, to connect with you. It's all new to her, being a stepmom. But I didn't ask for a stepmom, I blurted out, the words harsher than I intended. Dad's face softened, and he pulled me into a hug. I know, kiddo. But I asked for someone to share our lives, to bring in some happiness we've been missing. Just give it some time, for me? Ever since I can remember, animals were my thing. Dogs, cats, even the squirrels in the backyard, I loved them all. So, when I hit 10, I got this idea in my head about volunteering at the local animal shelter. It seemed like the perfect plan. I'd get to be around animals, and maybe even make a difference. But there was one big roadblock, Clara. One evening, I decided to bite the bullet and ask her. Dad was away, as usual, so it was just her and me at dinner. I pushed my peas around my plate, working up the courage. Clara, can I talk to you about something? I started, my voice a bit shaky. She looked up from her phone, which was a miracle in itself. Sure, what's up? I took a deep breath. I want to volunteer at the animal shelter. It's something I'm really passionate about. Clara put her phone down, which meant she was actually listening. Volunteer, huh? And what makes you think you're ready for that kind of commitment? I was taken aback by her tone. It wasn't supportive, it was more like she was challenging me. I love animals, and I want to help. I think I can do it. She gave me this look, the kind that made me feel like I was 3 feet tall instead of 10. Volunteering is hard work, Chloe. It's not just playing with puppies and kittens all day. You have to be willing to get your hands dirty. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, I get it. I'm not afraid of hard work, I said, though her tone made me nervous. Clara smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was more like she had an idea, and I wasn't sure I'd like it. Alright, if you're serious about this, I have a proposal. How about you start by taking on more responsibilities around the house? Show me you can handle that, and we'll talk about the shelter. I nodded eagerly, willing to agree to just about anything at that point. Okay, what kind of responsibilities? For starters, you can help out more with cleaning. Take care of your own room, the living room, and the kitchen. If you manage that for a few months, we'll see about the shelter. It sounded like a lot, but I was determined. Deal. I'll start tomorrow. Good, Clara said, picking her phone back up. Remember, it's not just about starting, it's about sticking with it. We'll see how you do. The next few months were brutal. I was scrubbing, dusting, and vacuuming every day after school. It was exhausting, and more than once, I wanted to give up. But the thought of volunteering at the shelter kept me going. I imagined all the animals I'd be helping, and it gave me the strength to keep at it. Finally, after what felt like forever, I approached Clara again. I was tired, my hands were rough from all the cleaning, but I was proud of what I'd accomplished. Clara, I've been doing everything you asked. Can we talk about the shelter now? She looked me over, as if assessing whether I'd really done enough. You've been keeping up with the chores, I'll give you that. But Chloe, there's more to volunteering than just hard work. It's also about maturity, about commitment. Are you sure you're ready for that? Her words felt like a slap in the face. After all I'd done, she was still questioning me? Yes, I'm ready. I've proven I can handle responsibility. Please, I just want a chance to make a difference. Clara sighed, tapping her fingers on the table. All right, Chloe. I'll make you a deal. Keep up with your chores, and add cooking dinner twice a week to the list. If you can manage that for another few months, we'll talk about the shelter again. It was moving the goalposts, and I knew it. But what choice did I have? Okay, I'll do it. But you have to promise we'll really talk about the shelter next time. We will, Clara said, though her voice didn't exactly inspire confidence. So, I added chef to my list of household duties, learning to cook beyond just mac and cheese. It was hard, and more than once, dinner was barely edible. But I kept at it, determined to get to that shelter one day. By the time I hit 12, I'd been playing housemaid for 2 years straight. The promise of volunteering at the animal shelter was the carrot dangling in front of me, keeping me going. I marked the calendar, counting down days like some kind of prisoner waiting for release. Finally, the day came. I approached Clara with a mix of hope and dread in my gut. Clara, I've done everything you asked. Can I start volunteering at the shelter now? My voice wobbled a bit, showing more nerves than I wanted. Clara was lounging on the sofa, flipping through a magazine like she hadn't a care in the world. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. Oh, Chloe. I was wondering when you'd bring this up again. A lump formed in my throat. Her tone wasn't promising. You said if I did all the chores and cooked, we could talk about it. I've done more than that. She sighed, setting her magazine aside with a dramatic flair. True, you've been quite helpful around here. But, Chloe, things change. You're still so young, and now I think it's best if you wait until you're 16. I felt like she'd slapped me. 16? But you promised. Anger bubbled up, raw and hot. Life isn't fair, Chloe. You'll learn that. In the meantime, there's a new deal. Keep up with your current chores, and start preparing meals for the whole family. Consider it part of your training. Training for what? To be Cinderella? I shot back, unable to hide my frustration. Clara's eyes narrowed. Watch your tone, young lady. This is, for your own good. Learning to manage a household is a valuable skill. I stormed off, feeling betrayed and used. The next few months, I kept my head down, doing what was asked without complaint. But the fire inside me didn't die down, it simmered, fueled by every unfair demand Clara placed on me. One day, I accidentally overheard a conversation that blew everything wide open. Clara was on the phone, laughing about how she'd tricked me into doing all her chores while still taking Dad's money for the housekeeper and cook. He hasn't got a clue. And that naive little Chloe is working her fingers to the bone for nothing. Clara gloated. My heart raced, anger turning to ice. I confronted her as soon as she hung up. I heard you. You've been lying to me and Dad. Taking the money and making me do all the work. Why? My voice was steady, fueled by a cold fury. Clara's face went from surprise to smug in seconds. Oh, Chloe. Always so dramatic. It's not like you had anything better to do. Besides, it's high time you learned the world doesn't revolve around you. That's it. I'm telling Dad. I turned on my heel, ready to expose her deceit. The moment Dad walked through the door after his latest trip, I was on him like a shadow. I had rehearsed my speech a dozen times, but when it came down to it, the words just spilled out in a messy torrent. Dad, we need to talk, now. It's about Clara. I blurted out before he could even set down his suitcase. He looked taken aback, but nodded, leading me into the living room, away from the prying ears of Clara, who was conspicuously absent, probably out at one of her endless social events. What's going on, Chloe? Dad's voice was laced with concern, the lines on his face deepening. It's Clara. She's been lying to us, taking the money you send for the housekeeper and cook and making me do all the work instead. And she promised me something she never planned to keep. I rushed, the anger and frustration I'd bottled up pouring out. Dad's expression hardened. I'll handle this, he said, a steely note in his voice I rarely heard. The confrontation that ensued later that evening was like a live wire sparking in the house. Voices raised, words thrown like daggers, and through it all, I stood by the staircase, listening as my world seemed to crumble. Clara's response was venomous, denying everything at first, but eventually turning the argument around, making it about how ungrateful and spoiled I was. Dad wasn't having any of it. The fight ended with Clara storming out, slamming the door behind her, leaving a silence that was almost worse than the shouting. After that, things went from bad to unbearable. Clara's attitude towards me shifted into something cold and dismissive. She would come home late, stinking of alcohol, and find fault in everything. My cooking, which I had painstakingly learned to improve, was never up to her standards. What is this slop? You expect me to eat this? She'd sneer, pushing the plate away. My attempts at keeping the house clean were met with similar disdain. You call this clean? Do it again, she'd command, pointing at a spot on the floor so tiny I'd need a microscope to see it. But the final straw was when I mentioned my dream of becoming a doctor. I had saved that conversation for a time when I thought she might be in a good mood. I was wrong. A doctor? With what money? You think we're made of cash? Clara exploded, her face twisted in rage. Dad, overhearing this, intervened, and another heated argument broke out. She's not spending your money, Clara. It's my decision, and I support Chloe's dream, he said, his voice firm. Their relationship hit rock bottom after that. Clara wouldn't speak to me directly anymore. She communicated through sticky notes left around the house, each one a command for some chore or another. Walking home from school, I never expected the scene that greeted me. The house was buzzing with noise, music blaring, and strangers milling around with drinks in their hands. Confusion and irritation battled inside me as I pushed through the crowd, looking for Clara. I found her in the living room, the center of attention, dancing carelessly with some guy I'd never seen before. "Clara, what's going on here?" I shouted over the music, my frustration peaking. She stopped dancing, turned to me with a drink in one hand, and laughed. It was a cold, joyless sound. "Oh, Chloe, dear. Haven't you heard? Your father's plane crashed." "He's gone," she said, her words casual, as if she was talking about the weather. My heart stopped. "What? That's not funny, Clara." She smirked, taking a sip of her drink. "I wish I was joking, darling. But it's true. And now, everything here," she gestured around the lavish room, "is mine." The room spun, and I could barely stand. "This can't be happening," I whispered, disbelief and grief washing over me. Clara's next words were like a slap in the face. "You should start packing, Chloe. There's no place for you here anymore. No one to protect you," she sneered, turning back to her party. I stumbled out of the room, my mind a whirlwind of shock and sorrow. I couldn't process it, Dad gone, and Clara, she was heartless. I locked myself in my room, picking up the phone with trembling hands. I dialed the number of Dad's old friend, Mr. Jacobs, who'd been a regular before Clara took over our lives. "Mr. Jacobs, it's Chloe," I managed to say, fighting back tears. "Chloe? What's wrong?" His voice was filled with concern. Through sobs, I told him everything. He was silent for a moment before speaking, his tone grave. "I'll be there. We'll sort this out together, Chloe." I didn't know what to do except follow his advice. I packed a bag with my most necessary belongings and documents, anything I thought I might need. As I left my room, suitcase in hand, Clara's laughter followed me out of the house. It was a sound full of victory and malice. I waited outside, feeling more alone than ever, until Mr. Jacobs pulled up. He didn't say anything, just opened the passenger door for me, his face set in a grim line. Sitting across from Mr. Jacobs in the dimly lit cafe, I felt like I was in some kind of bad dream. The noise around us faded into the background as he confirmed the devastating news about Dad. My world crumbled right there, tears streaming down my face as I tried to wrap my head around it all. "Chloe, I know this is hard. I'm so sorry," Mr. Jacobs said, his voice gentle, trying to offer some comfort. I could barely speak through my sobs. How did this happen?" My voice was a whisper, choked with grief. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he had to say next. "There's more you need to know. Your father came to see me not long before the accident. He had suspicions about Clara, about her loyalty. He changed his will, Chloe." I looked up, wiping my eyes. "Changed his will? What do you mean?" "He left everything to you, Chloe. The house, his assets, everything. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of," Mr. Jacobs explained, his eyes showing a mix of sadness and determination. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. Dad knew? And he tried to protect me, even from afar. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling a mix of anger and resolve. "We take back what's yours. I suggest we call the police and go to the house. I'll be with you every step of the way," Mr. Jacobs said, already reaching for his phone. When we arrived at the house, the police were already there, waiting. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car, the reality of the situation setting in. Mr. Jacobs was by my side as we approached the entrance, where Clara stood, surrounded by the remnants of her party, a look of shock on her face. "This is my house now, Clara. You need to leave," I said, my voice stronger than I felt, fueled by the injustice of it all. Clara laughed, a hollow sound, trying to mask her fear. You think you can just kick me out? This is my home too. The will says otherwise. You have no claim here. It's time for you and your guests to go, Mr. Jacobs interjected, his tone leaving no room for argument. Clara's face went pale, her eyes darting to the police officers. She knew she had lost. Without another word, she gathered her things, her guests following suit, the reality of the situation dawning on them as well. After they left, the silence of the house was deafening. It didn't feel like a victory, it felt like the beginning of a long road to healing. Mr. Jacobs helped me organize a small, respectful farewell for Dad, something that honored the man he was. I also started a book of memory, filling it with photos, stories, and little notes about Dad. It became my way of keeping him close, of remembering the good times and not letting the pain of his loss overshadow the love he had for me. Years flew by, and life had its way of moving forward. I graduated high school, with marks good enough to get me into medical college. Dad would have been proud. Alongside my studies, I started volunteering at the local animal shelter, just like I always dreamed. It was hard work but fulfilling, giving me a sense of purpose I'd longed for. Then, out of nowhere, Clara showed up at my doorstep. She looked so different, almost unrecognizable. Time and, I guessed, a hard life had taken their toll on her once flawless appearance. Chloe, please, you have to help me, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I was taken aback, not just by her sudden appearance, but by the desperation in her voice. Help you? What's going on? It's my health, Chloe. I'm sick, really sick. I need money for treatment, a lot of money, she sobbed, the story pouring out of her. Something didn't sit right with me. After everything that had happened, her showing up like this and asking for money was suspicious. If you're really sick, show me the documents, the diagnosis. I'm studying medicine, remember? I can understand it. At that, Clara's demeanor shifted. The tears stopped as if someone had turned off a tap, and her face hardened. You think I'm lying? You ungrateful little. I cut her off. No. I just need proof. If you're really sick, I want to help, but not without seeing the facts first. Clara's anger flared. I come here, swallowing my pride, and you accuse me of lying? I don't have to prove anything to you. That was the moment I knew for sure. She was trying to play me, just like old times. Clara, I think it's best if you leave. I won't be giving you any money without proof. And honestly, after everything, you shouldn't have come here asking for it. Her face twisted with rage, but she must have realized that making a scene wouldn't get her anywhere, especially not with me standing firm. Without another word, but with a glare that could freeze hell over, she turned and left. Life's taken a sweet turn. Here I am, living in this big, beautiful house with a yard that looks like something out of a magazine. The evenings are my favorite, just me wandering the garden or floating in the pool, thinking about how far I've come. Medical school's tough, no joke, but it's where I'm meant to be. The dream of becoming a doctor, it's closer every day. And volunteering? That's where my heart's at. I decided to put a chunk of the inheritance Dad left me into something meaningful, helping homeless animals. It's like coming full circle, back to that little girl who just wanted to make a difference. I've met some incredible folks at the shelter. We're a tight-knit crew, passionate about what we do. On the rare free weekends, we hang out, share stories, or just chill. It's a good life, a peaceful one. Clara? Haven't heard much since that day she showed up, begging for money. Rumor has it she went through some botched plastic surgery. Guess that was the treatment she needed. Can't say I'm surprised. She always did care more about appearances than what was underneath. Chloe, you coming to the fundraiser next weekend? That's Sam, one of my closest pals from the shelter, breaking into my thoughts. Yeah, wouldn't miss it. We've got a good thing going, raising money and awareness. It feels right, you know? Sam grinned. Absolutely. It's amazing what we're doing. And hey, your garden here? Perfect spot for a little pre-fundraiser gathering. I laughed. You just want another excuse to dive into the pool. Guilty as charged, Sam admitted with a chuckle. But seriously, Chloe, it's awesome what you're doing. Your dad would be proud. That hit home, warming me from the inside out. Thanks, Sam. That means a lot. He inspired me, in more ways than one. Now, it's about paying it forward, making a difference where I can. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, I felt a sense of contentment. This was my path, carved out through trials and triumphs. And Clara? Well, she was just a shadow of the past, a lesson learned.